A Metrolink commuter train engineer, 46-year-old Robert Sanchez, is distracted by a text message, and he passes straight through a red light track signal. Although he's engineering a train carrying 225 riders in California's San Fernando Valley, what's more important to him is exchanging dozens of texts with a 16-year-old boy. They talk about their love of trains, among other inappropriate things later uncovered in the chat log. Sanchez writes, "I'm really looking forward to getting you in the cab and showing you how to run a locomotive." 4 days earlier, he had allowed this boy and his friend to ride in the cab and sit at the controls. And this day, September 12th, 2008, he is planning on having the teen drive the train between 4 stations. As you can imagine, unauthorized ride-alongs are considered a serious violation of safety regulations, and on top of this, Sanchez has already received 2 prior warnings from his supervisors about improper use of cell phones while in the control cab. Another one of Sanchez's texts about a potential meeting place down the rail line was sent at 4:22 p.m. It reads, "Yeah, usually at North Camarillo." This is the last text message he ever sends. He runs through a red light signal and a track switch before entering a section of single rail track. And at the same time, farther up the same track, a Union Pacific Railroad freight train has been given the right of way and is heading in the opposite direction. At a combined speed of 83 miles an hour, the commuter train collides head-on with the freight train, and the impact is catastrophic. An LA Fire Department crew is the first to arrive. 24 passengers emerge from the wreckage, some dazed, walking in circles against the curtain of black smoke. A first responding officer, Tom Gustafson, describes the wreck as beyond human description, and the first responders then make one final request: send every heavy search and rescue unit available. 5 ambulances and 30 fire engines soon arrive. Hundreds of emergency workers across the county become involved in the rescue and recovery efforts, including at least 250 firefighters. Several responders enter the smoky and potentially toxic conditions to pull people out of the wreckage, and meanwhile, a 1,000-gallon tank of diesel fuel attached to the freight train is surrounded by flames. Firefighters lug in 600 feet of hose to try to put out the fire before the tank blows. Other first responders race from car to help passengers out of the train. Some head to the upper decks where they find several passengers stranded due to critical injuries. Even more rescue workers try to tunnel their way through the wreckage from the sides, and they encounter industrial-strength metal that breaks the tips of their jaws of life cutting tools, so they have to bring in several diamond-tipped blades. Meanwhile, passengers are screaming to be let out. At times, rescue workers can only see passengers' hands waving at them through the metal wreckage, and not far from the accident, officials turn a school parking lot into an airport. They bring in helicopters, fuel trucks, and build a mini air traffic control center. Outbound helicopters transport dozens of passengers at a time to the hospital, and inbound helicopters bring in go kits that have devices that allow them to listen through walls for struggling victims, crowbars, and handheld jacks designed to peel apart distended metal. Dogs are also brought in to smell any trapped survivors, and they relentlessly search, and this continues into the night and eventually into the next day. The rescue crews are able to save a significant amount of people, and in the end, 135 were injured, 87 of whom were taken to the hospital, 46 were in critical condition, and sadly, 25 people died in the accident. One of the passengers was a 49-year-old man named Charles E. Peck, sometimes called Chuck, and Charles was a man in love. Betrothed to Andrea Katz from Westlake Village, they had been engaged for 7 months, but the couple had been putting off marriage until they lived in the same state. He had worked for Delta Airlines over at the Salt Lake City International Airport, and he was in Los Angeles that day for a job interview. If he could have landed this job at Van Nuys Airport and moved to California, this meant he could finally marry his fiancée. That afternoon, Andrea had just finished ironing Charles's clothes for the job interview, and she was on her way to pick him up from the train station, and that's when she heard the news on the radio about the massive train crash. Soon, Charles's entire family was notified, and they anxiously waited for any reports on Charles. He had been seated in the first passenger car, just behind the engine car. He only had one more stop to go when the engine car collided with the freight train and was violently shoved back into that first passenger car. The Chatsworth train collision in LA became Metrolink's deadliest collision in history. And many passengers, especially those inside the first passenger car, died immediately. But what's odd is that for those first 11 hours after the accident, Charles Peck's cell phone placed 35 calls to various family members and loved ones. Among those called were his adult son from his first marriage, his brother, his stepmother, his sister, and his fiancée, Andrea. It made for a very long night for his loved ones. As they picked up every single one of his calls, all they could hear was static. They had tried to call back, but immediately it went to voicemail, and these intermittent calls gave them hope that Charles was still alive, only trapped somewhere in the wreckage. Charles had been divorced and had 3 grown children from his first marriage. His son, 22-year-old CJ, screamed into the phone, "We love you. Hang in there. They are coming to get you." He insisted that his father could not be dead. Rescue crews actually traced the location of Charles's phone through its signal, and they looked back in the wreckage of that first passenger train car where he had been seated, where they believed the calls were coming from. At 3:28 a.m., Charles's phone made one last outgoing call. About an hour later, the rescue crew finally found his body. Here's where it gets more bizarre. The coroner told Charles Peck's family members that he had been killed instantly. His body showed no signs that he lived even a short time after the crash. No one could explain why his cell phone had been calling his loved ones over and over again, 35 times over the course of 11 hours after he had already died. Welcome back to Do Geese See God? I'm your host, Austin Lee. My beautiful dog, Jerry, is here, as always. We also have Robert and Matt behind the desk here today.
Hey.
What's up?
Hey, man.
How you guys doing?
Good.
Lovely.
Chilling?
Yeah.
Chilling.
Remember to go give the podcast some love out there. It depends upon your love. Really. Go follow, like, and subscribe on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, go hit up that hype button on the YouTube app as well on mobile. And really, leave a review on Spotify or Apple if you listen over there. I think we're sitting at a solid 5-star on Spotify, so I appreciate you guys. Thank you to everyone who has supported the show, big and small. And I can't stress this enough. If you really want to support the show big time, go support the Patreon and the YouTube members. If you want us to keep pumping out these awesome episodes, you'll also get access to that big Q&A segment I did a while back, as well as the bedtime stories that I've been working on. I'm cooking up some new ideas as well. So stay tuned for the Patreon and members stuff. But this episode will be covering specific after-death communications, known as phone calls from the dead. Sometimes they're just called PCFDs. You might hear me say that throughout the episode, but they have been logged and studied by parapsychologists for decades. And when you break down a phone call, let's just break down a phone call at its most basic level, it's already kind of strange to begin with. And I'm not trying to sound like the guy like, whoa, dude, have you ever stopped to think about a phone call, man? I'm not trying to be like that, but I am being like that a little bit. But really, the phone call rings, right? And then let's say I check the caller ID, and let's say it says mom. I answer the phone, I hear her voice. I now have this unwavering belief that there's another living being on the other end, and it is undoubtedly my mother, right? With those very few verifications, I believe and I trust that this is my mom, even though there's relatively not that much empirical evidence at hand. So like my listeners, they just trust that Robert and Matt are here in the studio behind the cameras, even though this could be all AI. They have no idea. And we're never giving them cameras, I guess. Even though we should. I was just talking about, I'm going to get a camera one of these days and we're going to do the Robert face reveal because it's been too long.
Disembodied voices forever.
Yeah, no, we're going to
10,000.
We got to shit. Right? Yeah, Robert said 10,000 subscribers, but I'm saying
200,000 likes.
200. Wow. Okay. No, we're going to do it because I say so. And it's my show.
Touche.
But really, think about the phone call, right? even outside of the paranormal and within reason, there's this unverifiable nature about phone calls already. And add all the different kinds of communication with our smartphones today, it's not that crazy to think that what or who we're in contact with might not actually be what or who we think is on the other end, right? I mean, think of catfishing or scam calls and messages. It might not be that person at all. Think of all the bots that we encounter on the internet. So for this episode, I want you to take that level of questioning, that unknowingness, but then I want you to step into the realm of the paranormal. Step into the Twilight Zone. I could never do Rod Serling justice. I need to start smoking a cigarette on set back here and wear a suit.
There we go. Yeah, awesome.
Then turn it into a real show.
Yeah.
But going into this episode with phone calls from the dead, during the research phase, I really expected to be unsettled by this episode, which I definitely was. I mean, we hit the ground running with a very sad, tragic story. And some of the circumstances surrounding some of these cases are very tragic. They're very mysterious. But there's also ultimately something very wholesome about them. They're not your typical paranormal terror. They're not your typical tragedy. While this type of encounter involving phone calls might at first seem uncanny, a bit frightening, once you dig a little beneath the surface, you'll realize that there might be some true healing and resolve connected to these types of encounters. Because really, if it's a loved one who has passed, isn't that the person who you most desperately want to speak to? Isn't that comforting to some degree? I did want to ask, have you guys ever experienced anything like this? Not necessarily a phone call with the dead, because I think that's more rare, but an after-death communication of some kind. They can be some sort of experience, some visual, some dreams, something. I don't know if you guys have ever encountered something like that.
I've definitely had a dream where I saw my grandfather after he passed. He was kind of a silent guy, so he didn't say anything, just kind of looked at me and nodded. It was quite a while ago, so I don't really recall any of the other details. But
Just very brief.
Yeah, very, very brief.
Yeah, I once had a really intense dream after my grandpa passed away. I know a lot of people will say, oh, well, that's just your unconscious thoughts. Kind of, that's how your brain works. That's how your dreams work. But I did have this very vivid and intense dream that I still remember to this day. And that was, 24 years ago or something, that I still remember this.
Damn.
Because it was so vivid that I felt like this wasn't just some normal type of dream. Granted, when my grandpa passed, it was the first time that I had really encountered death to that degree. I had never seen a dead body before that. I think it was about 8 or 9 years. Yeah, I was 8 years old. I had never really remembered a funeral to that degree. So there were a lot of impressions happening. But my dream, we had this cottage that my grandparents own that now my parents own, and we go up. It's on Lake Huron, and I always connected that place with my grandparents. Every time I went up, they were there. It was just a great experience. So in this dream, we always have the campfire out on the beach, and we had the campfire as usual. But in this dream, within the log, these letters started to kind of break away as the fire goes. You know, when you look at a fire and you're looking at the log, like the pieces become ash, or they kind of fall off as the log is burning. So in that, it was just his name like written into the log. I didn't even see him. It was just that. But I think that would be classified under an after-death communication, or ADC as they call it. It's not necessarily a phone call, but we'll get into that a bit more later. That's my only one. Robert, did you have any experiences like that?
No, but that was a crazy one that you just shared.
Yeah, that was I'll never forget that. That was the only. He wasn't even in it, which is bizarre. I think a lot of the after-death communications, the person is in it, their voice, their image. It was just the setting that I had connected him to, and then his name appearing in the burning log.
Matt's yours was cool too.
Yeah,
Mine was, just kind of regular. He just kind of gave me a nod. That's all I remember.
Sometimes it's as simple as that, though. They don't have to be these grand stories that we tell. And that's why I believe yours too, because sometimes when people have these really elaborate stories connected to it, I'm like, I believe it a little bit less now.
Well, I think they say, like, if you're lying about a story, try to just give the most weird and insane detail, and people tend to believe it more.
Yeah.
But you know,
But that's for fiction.
I'm not here to lie. So.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But yeah, this one will be covering several encounters over the phone and also diving into the theories surrounding these paranormal phone calls. We'll also be covering the scientific studies because, yes, there are some surrounding after-death communication, not just fringe studies, not even just parapsychological studies. I think we actually found some from a university that we pulled. So pretty reliable data regarding ADC. And then we'll bring it home with how modern technology like our smartphones and things like AI have changed the landscape of after-death communications. As always, we're going to run with the rapid fire section. This one, we're just going rapid fire phone call facts. So strap in. Alexander Graham Bell, who patented the first practical telephone, actually pushed for people to answer the phone saying ahoy or ahoy hoy. Thomas Edison is credited with standardizing hello as a greeting instead. Kind of boring, in my opinion. But a Connecticut telephone book from 1878 recommended ending a telephone conversation by saying, "That is all." Big fan. Back in 1879, when phone numbers finally came along, some switchboard operator managers thought that assigning a numerical identification to people would be dehumanizing. I mean, historically, especially by World War II, we would know this to be very, very true. So as a compromise, many communities used alphanumeric systems and their phone numbers began with 2 letters. That's actually why we still have letters combined with numbers on our phone. And the system was eventually switched to all digital phone numbers by the end. But back in the 60s, people joined local anti-digit dialing leagues to try and fight the switch to all numbers. Didn't really work. I was trying to think of all the ways numbers identify me. You know, the social security numbers, phone numbers, my birthday, 12211992. The first payphone dates back to the 1880s. A man named William Gray couldn't access a phone to call a doctor for his wife who was ill. Luckily, she survived, but this dude said, never again. This is how much he loved his wife. William developed a coin-operated phone that was available to the public in 1889, and within 3 years, there were 81,000 payphones across the U.S. and over 2 million by the year 2000. Today, those numbers have dwindled to less than 100,000. I can't even remember the last time I saw a payphone. But just think, if that guy's wife hadn't had a medical emergency, we might not have gotten the 2002 box office hit Phone Booth, starring Colin Farrell and Kiefer Sutherland. The first mobile telephone call was on June 17th, 1946. It was made from 80 pounds of transmission equipment installed inside a car. I'm imagining it was like a DeLorean with just a bunch of transmission equipment smashed inside. The first public handheld cell phone was a Motorola Dynatac 8000X in 1983. You should look at these things. It weighed a hefty 2.2 pounds. You had to charge it for 10 hours for a 20 to 30 minute phone call, and it cost only a measly $3,995. It was first conceived of by Martin Cooper, who made the first call with a prototype on April 3rd, 1973, and he decided to call Joel Engel, a rival competitor at AT&T's Bell Labs, just so he could rub it in. I would have been more classy and just ordered a New York City slice or something like that. But today there are more mobile phones than there are people on the planet Earth. Your smartphone has more computing power than the computers that landed Apollo 11 on the moon. A lot of us know that. But the average person unlocks their phone between 80 to 150 times a day, many times without even realizing it. And this last fact, about half of all liquid damaged phones were dropped in the toilet. So switching gears back to Charles Peck and the 35 mysterious phone calls after his death, there's a dark irony to that Chatsworth rail disaster because it was a distraction over a cell phone that caused the accident, resulting in the deaths of 25 people. And it was also a cell phone that was used in the aftermath to potentially communicate with a living from the dead. I thought that was just a bizarre coincidence. After Charles was discovered, the Peck family said they were very grateful for the rescue crews who did all they could to save him. Oddly, his cell phone was never recovered from the scene of the train accident. So what exactly was causing Charles's phone to make what seemed like very specific phone calls. From the reports, the calls weren't completely random. They were to people who were very close to him. So there are some potential rational explanations for what happened. Some suspect that heat or impact damage might have shorted the phone's circuitry, and this caused the phone to repeatedly dial recent contacts, or the pressure from the wreckage, along with movement, could have manipulated the touchscreen and buttons and made that call. Could it all have been some technical glitch or pressure from the wreck? Sure. But again, nothing was ever confirmed, especially since his phone was never recovered. Had someone else in the train somehow gotten a hold of his phone and then tried to place the calls in the recent contacts list? Possibly, but then wouldn't it most likely have been recovered if someone was using that phone? Could the coroner's report of him dying very soon after the accident been incorrect? Maybe, but I tend to believe those because people take that very seriously. And there are extensive legal ramifications if they were lying, so I wouldn't really assume that. But since there has been no explanation, Charles Peck's case has become one of the most definitive examples of the PCFD phenomenon, and there is very detailed data and witnesses to back up every single one of these calls, but there's no definitive rational explanation with evidence as to why these calls were going out. After understanding that Charles died, almost immediately, his son CJ said that he believed the phone calls were messages from his dad, and he was telling them all that he was not suffering. This is one of the most common theories about PCFDs. Many times they act as messages from the beyond, letting loved ones know that everything is going to be okay. I don't really know. I'm curious, Matt and Robert, what do you guys think happened here? I mean, there's a lot of theories, but I can't explain anything. I think that maybe someone picked up his phone, possibly. But then again, the story is extremely convincing. Because I don't know, if someone was dialing out, why would they not be able to get phone calls in? Remember, it just went to voicemail, and then it was just static whenever they picked up. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you have any theories on this?
I would like to believe somebody picked up, like somebody grabbed the phone and was trying to reach his family, but like you said, it was just static when they heard it. So I think it's probably circuitry.
Yeah.
That's my personal
just a technical
theory.
glitch.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
But so many calls for a technical glitch is
Right.
Yeah.
so
35
weird. Yeah.
over 11
That is-
hours
yeah, that
too.
is a lot.
Also, my phone would have died by that point, right? Like the battery would have ran out. That's kind of impressive that it stayed alive for that long,
Mm-hmm.
continuously making phone calls. So I don't really know what to think about that one. That's pretty convincing. But outside of that story, PCFDs get a bit more confusing. October 26, 1968 at 10:30 p.m., a muffled but familiar voice came in through the Owens home phone. "Sis, tell Don I'm feeling real bad. Never felt this way before. Tell him to get in touch with me the minute he comes in. It's important, sis." Then the line went dead. Ethel Owens stood in her kitchen, shocked and a bit confused at the call from her old friend and neighbor, Lee Epps, and she tried to call him back, but there was no answer. Her husband, Don, who was also close friends with Lee, tried to call Lee's home phone a few times, but still no answer. Lee Epps was a bachelor with a great job that paid well in Toledo, Ohio, and while he never had any financial troubles, he also never had any luck when it came to women or any significant others. And since he had no partner, he often made very strong connections with the few friends he did have. And this was true with Ethel and Don Owens. He even called Ethel sis, and Don once said, "Lee Epps and I were closer than brothers." They once lived in the same neighborhood and spent so much time together they felt like family, but Lee later moved and he and the couple naturally grew apart. They still saw him occasionally for dinner or an evening out, maybe a telephone conversation here and there, but their moments together became few and far between. The couple soon caught wind that Lee Epps had actually been in a coma in Mercy Hospital, less than 6 blocks from their house, and he passed away that evening at 10:30 p.m. Upon hearing the news, Don and Ethel looked at each other in shock because the time of the mysterious phone call from Lee that night had been 10:30 p.m. What's interesting in this case is that the caller, Lee Epps, presumably a dead man, is giving information that only Lee would know. He called Ethel sis, which was his nickname for her, and only Lee ever calls her this. The couple would then transcribe the phone call from their memory and even go so far as to have it notarized. But this story was referenced in the 1979 book Phone Calls from the Dead by D. Scott Rogo and Raymond Bayless. And this book includes 50 cases involving PCFD, and it's considered the pioneering text into this bizarre phenomenon. One really famous case that put this phenomenon on the map involved the American thriller writer Dean Koontz, and it happened in September of 1998. This man, if you see a picture of him, he has a very strong head of hair, but he had been working in his office. He's also a very prolific writer. He's written so many books.
My mom read a lot of his stuff.
Oh, yeah. He also, I think he even admitted he didn't write everything that he's credited with writing, but he had like 10 pen names, and apparently he was writing erotica with his wife, but then not all of them were written by him exactly. I was going into a little bit of a rabbit hole on him just because I was looking at his bibliography. I'm like, this is crazy how much this guy wrote. But really, maybe he just had a ghostwriter.
Yeah.
You get the joke?
Oh, good.
Yeah. Anyway, one day he was working in his office when the phone rang, and he answered the home phone receiver, and he heard a woman's very weak voice on the other end, and all it said was this: "Please be careful." When he asked who was calling, the voice didn't respond. It only gave the warning, "Please be careful," 3 more times, and with each time, the voice became more distant. Then the line went dead. In shock, Dean thought the voice sounded exactly like his mother, Florence, but she had been dead nearly 20 years. She passed away in 1969 at the age of 53. So could it have been some prank? Possibly. But Dean's number was unlisted, meaning it wasn't in the phone book, so not many crank calls would be coming in. Could it have been an accidental dial? Again, possibly. But what makes Dean's story interesting is what happened only 2 days after this phone call. He was contacted by his father's retirement home, and Ray had often caused trouble, not only at the retirement home, but really throughout his own life at his home for decades. He was an abusive, alcoholic father who had worn both Dean and his mother down throughout their lives. But before Florence's death, she told Dean that she had something very, very important to tell him. Unfortunately, she passed before she could ever say what it was, but Dean wondered if it was going to be the revelation that Ray was not his biological father. Fast forward 2 decades to the retirement home, and Ray's behavior escalated to violence, and he even assaulted another resident on a walker. So nurses at the facility requested that Dean come in to try to settle his father down, and he agreed. Just before entering his father's room, the voice's warning rang in his head. "Please be careful. Please be careful." At the time, Dean didn't know that his father had used some of his small allowance to go and buy a yellow-handled fishing knife. He had sharpened the blade and even oiled the hinge so it opened almost as fast as a switchblade. Right when he entered, Ray grabbed the knife and tried to stab Dean, and Dean was able to avoid the blade and wrestle it away from his father because of that warning. Meanwhile, someone had called the police, so when Dean exited the room with his father's knife, police approached and yelled at him to drop the knife, obviously, but confused, he told them it was his father that they wanted, not him. But in hindsight, Dean recalled the police on the verge of potentially shooting him, so he ended up dropping the knife, luckily. Dean later said that if it wasn't for that warning from the mysterious voice, the outcome would have been vastly different. He said this: "It was such a strange call. I don't claim that it was a ghost. I don't know what I believe. It certainly was odd. People report these kinds of events all the time, and it's always struck me as interesting that everyone seems to have had an experience or two of the uncanny. Sometimes I believe that call was from my mother, and sometimes that it was very strange, serendipitous wrong number. I think you always have to keep some skepticism about things like this, but it's comforting to think that there may be a realm where personality survives." He'd never know for sure, but either way, the warning most likely ended up saving his life that day. While the majority of PCFDs are very short, like in Dean's story, it's only a sentence repeated a few times, very cryptic even, some are actually full conversations. One Sunday evening in May of 1971, Bonnie and C.E. McConnell of Tucson, Arizona, received a surprising phone call. Mr. McConnell answered, but didn't know who was speaking, so he brought the phone over to his wife, asking, "Honey, do you know who this is?" Bonnie put the phone up to her ear and immediately recognized the voice. It was their old friend Enid. Enid had been very friendly to the couple for decades. She was a very successful author, but gave away much of her money. In her old age, she ended up in a significant amount of medical debt, classic America. And the McConnells always hoped she would write one last book to try and stabilize her finances, but she never did. As she grew older, she ended up bouncing between hospitals and nursing care units, and the couple tried their best to see her at least every Christmas, and they would always bring her a bottle of blackberry wine. Unfortunately, the McConnells, like many who get older, eventually lost contact with her completely. Months passed, but now here she was on the other end of the line, and the couple listened in as Enid explained she had been transferred to the Handmaker Jewish nursing home for the aged in Tucson. The couple ended up having a 30-minute conversation with her, and Mr. McConnell hopped on the call from the bedroom telephone. Enid ended up saying how it was too bad they hadn't visited her, so Bonnie told her they'd come bring her some blackberry wine soon for her birthday that was coming up, but she declined. She said, "I don't need it now." She said she was doing fine and that she never had such good care and that she had never been happier. Curious about her mobility in her old age, Bonnie asked if she was on her bedroom phone, figuring she was lying down in bed on the phone. But Enid said no. Surprised, Bonnie asked if that meant she could get up and use the phone, but Enid said, "Oh, I get around fine." After the call ended, Mr. McConnell told his wife, "That sounded like Enid from 20 years ago." A few days later, when they contacted the Handmaker nursing home, the receptionist informed them that Enid had passed away that previous Sunday at 10:30 a.m. This was actually several hours before they spoke to her on the phone at around 5 p.m. that evening. So this became a very rare case where two people participated in a conversation with a phone call from the dead. They also verified the time and also spoke to the deceased person for more than a half hour after they had died. Before we dive into any more examples, because there are dozens, if not hundreds of documented cases like this, I want to try and explain what exactly is going on with these phone calls, because I feel like contextualizing them with some theories might help explain some of the later ones, and even the ones we've already mentioned. And there have been a ton of theories on what's going on, but to break it down, the most common examples of phone calls from the dead are known as simple calls. They're very short, sometimes cut off mid-sentence, and this is known as type 1. Occasionally, some are very long, like the McConnell story, which is type 2, and the recipient does not know the person is dead. And type 3 is response calls, where the living actively places a call, hoping to contact the dead. Type 4 is a mix of 1 and 2. But in the case of Charles Peck, that first one we covered, the calls contained no conversation at all, which is extremely rare. That isn't even really categorized as far as I could see. But for the cases where the calls go through, the recipients almost always insist that they recognize the voice immediately. And many times they use things like nicknames or private details that only the deceased would know, which was true for many of the cases that we covered. Often, no hang-up click is heard, and the line just fades or goes dead. And usually these calls happen soon after the caller's death, usually within 6 months, sometimes almost immediately. But sometimes they can be much, much later on, sometimes on something like an anniversary or a special occasion. So to start off the theories, we're going to hit the paranormal theories to try and explain what's happening. There's something called the survivalist theory. And in parapsychology, there's an idea that hauntings or psychic communications are received because some element of the human personality or spirit survives after the death. Some just call this an afterlife, really. And this residual personality can make contact with the living. The entities can exert influence on a phone line to communicate. Simple enough. According to parapsychologist Dr. J.B. Ryan, about 1 in 5 people have ESP talent. This is called extrasensory perception, also called the sixth sense. 1 in 5 is a lot.
That is, yeah, quite a lot. I'm like, is that me? Am I the one?
I know. Sometimes. Maybe you just haven't tapped in. Who knows?
Yeah.
But these people, they basically have the ability to perceive things like others' thoughts, hidden objects, and distant events or future events, as well as communicating with the dead. And these people are more susceptible to phone calls from the dead. I've also heard this theory that people who came from really toxic or potentially abusive environments, especially when they were young, they have such heightened perceptions because they had to navigate these spaces that they almost develop ESP because they are on edge constantly. That's the framework of their childhood. So they start perceiving things that regular people who had like non-abusive childhoods, so they're just like normal functioning households.
Yeah.
They just wouldn't really notice things. I always thought that was a fascinating theory.
Yeah.
But another theory is the anti-survivalist theory, and this proposes that there are no residual elements from the dead. It's the living who are unconsciously generating what's called psychokinetic force. In many case studies by parapsychologists, paranormal activity tends to surround those who are dealing with unresolved internal conflicts and those who are not in a steady mental state. And as you can imagine, this includes many who are grieving their loved ones, and their grief might be fueling these encounters. So these experiences could be telepathically triggered thought forms that mimic the voice of the dead, in theory. Parapsychologist Berthold Schwartz calls this phenomenon a mind ghost, and it's sensitive to the thoughts, emotions, and motivations of the perceiver. In other words, it's like a self-generated hallucination. The survivalist theory argues that PCFDs aren't necessarily always fueled by grief, because in many cases, the perceiver doesn't know that the other person is even dead, like we mentioned. Many cases, roughly about 27%, show that the calls come immediately after the death, where the person receiving the call couldn't have known the caller was dead. Or they arrive very, very far out, more than 6 months, which is about 22%, so the perceiver might have already healed from the grieving process by then. In the cases where the perceiver couldn't have known about the death, some argue it might be a telepathic awareness of the death that sparks psychokinesis. But that's a lot of maybe mumbo jumbo for some people. I mean, I always like the paranormal theories, but as for a more grounded approach, there was an article in the Australian Journal of Parapsychology published in 2025, and it explains this. In the early stages of bereavement, people often experience a period of acute grief marked by symptoms such as sleep disturbance, low mood, appetite changes, and physical exhaustion. In some cases, the stage that follows is sometimes referred to as integrated grief, and it may provide the psychological conditions for experiences that are interpreted in deeply personal and transformative ways. Coincidences can feel purposeful because they reveal a meaning already present, and from this perspective, synchronicities may help a person regain direction in the middle of a crisis. In this sense, experiences like these suggest that even in the aftermath of deep emotional pain, something valuable can emerge, a chance to grow, to heal, and to carry the memory of the deceased in a way that brings meaning rather than despair. Outside of any paranormal explanations, people have chalked these phone calls up to things like technical faults, misinterpretations, hoaxes, dreams, and hallucinations. Grief itself can produce a lot of distortions, as we mentioned earlier, but even then, it's difficult to explain every single case since many are so different from one another. No matter what the cause or the explanation of this phenomenon, one of the most crucial parts to this encounter is that many say that it ultimately helped them find peace while grieving. The University of Northampton in 2019 conducted a survey of the bereaved. Their subject was broader than phone calls. They covered what's called after-death communication, or ADC, as we mentioned earlier, and this includes PCFDs. So this occurs when a bereaved person unexpectedly perceives the deceased person in a manner that is interpreted as indicative of the continued survival of some aspect of that person. In other words, you're just contacting the dead in a variety of ways. This includes senses of sight, hearing, smell, or touch, but commonly recipients might simply feel the presence of the deceased person or have a subjective impression of having received a contact or communication. For example, like during sleep, which is like what I had with my grandpa, what Matt had with his grandpa. The studies that we came across said that about 30 to 35% of those who were studied across different cultures and time periods experienced some form of ADC. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
That is a ton of people, but many do not report these interactions out of fear that it would be diagnosed as a psychiatric disorder. We were kind of talking about that earlier, how even just saying like, oh, I had a dream of my grandpa after he passed is, oh, like, is someone going to think I'm weird?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that's what the whole mind ghost thing.
Yeah.
Immediately, I'm like, yeah, I'd probably just think I was going crazy.
Yeah, people jump to just, oh, this is a hallucination, right? It couldn't be anything else. Only about 28% had discussed their experiences before this study, and only 14% told more than one person. So I'm curious how many of my listeners have experienced after-death communications. So let me know down in the comments so we can pump these statistics up. Another study stated that 70 to 80% of people experience some version of ADC within months of a loved one's death. 70 to 80%. That is a lot. I know Robert's doubting this study right here. But I mean, if you remember ADC's after-death communications, like they said, they can just be impressions. It doesn't even have to be, I think we often visualize these things like, oh my God, it is literally my grandma's figure coming to me and speaking to me in her voice. I think it can be a bit more ethereal than that. Something very fleeting. Like I said, in my dream, my grandpa wasn't even there, but I did feel like that was an after-death communication. But moving back to that Northampton study, it concluded that when ADCs are acknowledged and engaged with, they have been found to aid the bereaved person in coming to terms with their loss. Counterintuitively, it seems that participants who felt a continued bond with the deceased as a result of their ADC felt more able to accept the death of their loved ones, let them go, and re-engage with the wider world around them. So this seems to be the common theme here of finding peace and comfort and be willing to let go. In another 2024 study, 73% of participants who had experienced ADC found comfort in them. So not only are these experiences incredibly common, they're also generally positive. I find this really fascinating because we often think of the paranormal as this very dark, potentially evil, demonic thing, mostly due to Hollywood's depiction of it. But in these cases, we can actually see it being very beneficial, kind of light, kind of calming, soothing.
Yeah, there's a really good movie called We Are Still Here. It's a horror movie, and this family moves into a house because their son has passed away in a car accident, and the mother keeps feeling the son's presence in the house. And of course, the father's like, no, like you're having a hard time dealing with it. And she's insistent, no, I feel him in the house. And obviously it's not a negative thing for her.
Yeah.
But, soon,
then it does become a negative thing. Yeah, because it's a horror movie. Yeah. But I find that fascinating that going into this episode, I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be totally terrifying. But no, it ends up being really comforting. And this sense of comfort explains why many people reach out to mediums to try and contact their recently deceased. And this has been a popular practice for a very long time. It started pretty much back in the spiritualism movement in the 1800s, especially after the Civil War in the US, because so many had lost loved ones during that time period in the US. It was the Fox sisters that really sparked this movement. They actually ended up being frauds, which maybe we'll cover in a different episode. I know I've harped a little bit on mediums before in this context because I don't know, I think people just see profit as the motive and that's what they run with. And I think they're charlatans, but I've had some good conversations with people who have maybe changed my mind on mediums in this regard, but I think still generally for the most part, I don't trust them when they tell me that they can communicate with a dead loved one.
It feels pretty gross when you're asking for money to communicate somebody with their loved one. It feels gross.
Yeah.
I still really like Houdini's take on it.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Talked about in a previous episode.
Yeah, that was so good. He hated mediums. Just hated.
And his wife was on it too.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Yeah. So with all those theories, it's important to point out that speaking with the dead using long-distance communications technology actually dates back as early as the 1800s with the telegraph. A man named R.H. Field had a spooky encounter, and his story was first published back in the 1850s. Field was described as an intelligent and conscientious man, a true gentleman. He was a telegraph operator for 22 years, and he did not believe in the supernatural, even after this experience, which is wild. Field had taken a broken telegraph he was going to fix back to his home after a night shift. He put it on a shelf in an old cupboard He then went to bed. But only a few minutes later, he heard the lever on the instrument begin ticking. It was very faint, very subdued, but it was an undeniable noise. He then got up, opened the cupboard door, grabbed the instrument. He saw that it kept ticking, so he put it on the table in front of him. He couldn't understand how it was operating since there was no telegraph wire of any kind nearby and there was no battery. He then listened to the Morse code rattle off, and it said, "Do you get me?" He was so overwhelmed, but he responded, "Yes," out loud. He didn't even respond in Morse code. But still, whatever was listening in apparently heard him. The ticking then explained that the entity's name was Charles Blake. He said his parents, who resided in Mount Pleasant, Iowa, had lost track of him and didn't know his fate. So he asked Field to write his father, Homer, and inform him that he had died of yellow fever down in Texas. Field then found an address connected to Homer Blake through a postmaster. He sent him the letter, but the letter that returned was from a different man that now resided at the property. Homer had reportedly moved several years earlier, but the man confirmed that Homer once had a son named Charles, who they believed to be dead. So it confirmed this whole story and this entity that he was contacting through this telegraph. Field then returned the telegraph to the station and never disconnected it ever again. And he never believed in the paranormal after this.
He just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Just in case they want to reach back out.
Yeah. So these types of stories go back to our earliest versions of long-distance communication technology, and it has continued through the years. Apparently, Thomas Edison in 1920 wanted to create a dedicated spirit communication device, or as he put it, an apparatus, to see if it is possible for personalities which have left this earth to communicate with us. But his device never came to fruition. He was just an ideas guy.
He put the kibosh on it. He didn't want to get it to the wrong hands.
Yeah, he's like, oh, this can't make me money anyways, so I'm not going to do it. Others claim to have created similar devices like the Spiricom in the late 70s and early 80s. Researcher George Meek, an amateur radio operator, and William O'Neill claimed they had developed a two-way communications machine with the dead. They called it, which is a mouthful, an electromagnetic etheric communication system. And they allegedly spoke with the spirit of a dead man, a NASA scientist, George Mueller. And they spoke with him at length. All right? The ruse really only lasted for so long. Some began to notice that William's voice would have the same buzzing signal the alleged spirit was using. So he was most likely using a device or a microphone to pretend to be the voice of the spirit. And they would even document these conversations. But every time the spirit's voice came through, William always had his back to the camera. So pretty obviously this was a hoax. And on top of that, William's house had burned down in a suspected arson. He was living in the burnt shell of it, essentially. And his partner in the hoax, George Meek, was his only source of income. So William was being paid on a per result basis for producing spirit contact. So he had every incentive to make this happen. Sadly, he was later diagnosed with schizophrenia, but some believe that might have contributed to his belief of the communications. He might not have been completely making it up. There may have been something else going on there, but it ended up being a complete hoax. But anyway, with all these examples, it seemed like the phenomenon of speaking with the dead through technology became most popular when phones came around. And now our phones have several different ways of communicating, especially through text and email. So if you were sick of the history lessons, we're now bringing it into the modern age here. And one of the weirdest modern cases involving email is about a man named John Fraze, who went by Jack. He had sadly suddenly died in his home in Dunmore, Pennsylvania, from heart complications due to arrhythmia on June 10th, 2011. He was only 32 years old. That's 1 year younger than I am. He left behind his mother, 2 young children, and many friends and family who were shocked by the sudden loss. His obituary described him as a larger-than-life personality. He loved his kids, motorcycles, tattoos, music, and animals. He was in a few bands. He had a very sarcastic sense of humor, which I relate to, and he was always known as the guy who could make people laugh, even on their worst days. But throughout life, he was pretty much inseparable with his best friend, Tim Hart. They had known each other since they were 17 years old, and one night, 5 months after Jack's death, Tim was scrolling through his email inbox on his living room couch, and he stopped when he noticed he received an email from Jack's account. The subject line said, "I'm watching." Jack said he turned white as a ghost. All the email said was, "Did you hear me? I'm at your house. Clean your effing attic." Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Apparently not long before Jack died, they had been up in Tim's attic talking about what they would do with the space. And it was the second to last time he was ever at his house. After this email, more friends and family received messages. Jack's cousin, Jimmy McGraw, received an email from Jack's personal account on November 21st, 2011, and it said this: "I knew you were going to break your ankle. Tried to warn you. Got to be careful." Shockingly, Jimmy said he broke his ankle only a week before getting the email. He said, "I'd like to say Jack sent it, just because I look at it as he's gone, but he's still trying to connect with me, trying to tell me to move along, to feel better." The big question was, were these emails legitimate? Most email services allow you to schedule emails being sent out even months or years in advance. So was Jack simply pulling pranks on his close friends? Possibly. I wouldn't put it past him. Sounds like he liked to mess with people.
Prank.
I mean, if maybe it was one of those things where if you knew him well enough, it was kind of up his alley. But what doesn't really add up is that Jack's death was reportedly shocking and sudden. So could he have spent all this time setting up these emails? I don't know. Maybe. But if we believe the cousin story, how would he have known that his cousin would break his ankle months after his death? Even if he could set up these emails, that doesn't make any sense. Did someone else possibly have access to Jack's emails? Or was it hacked? Or was it a case of email phishing or spoofing? That's also possible, but no one ever came forward and confessed. I mean, that one's confusing. Either way, Jack's mother told the email recipients that they should accept the messages as gifts. And they got people talking about her son again, which was very nice to see. Many friends and family who believed that it was Jack on the other end said it helped them find peace during the grieving process.
There it is again, the comfort.
Yeah, exactly. It's a recurring theme here. What do you think of that one, Robert? You're our new resident skeptic.
I don't know.
I mean, the ankle breaking doesn't make any sense.
Not
right?
at all. Yeah.
I could see how,
he's
like,
planning ahead or whatever.
Right,
you can't
yeah.
plan that.
So the only rational explanation for that was maybe someone had gotten into his email account and was messing with people.
Right, like
maybe.
a hacked account or something.
Yeah.
I'd be trying to find the IP address.
Yeah, let's
right, from
trace
wherever
these
those
things.
sent.
Yeah.
Like, let's see that, because in that picture you provided, I was trying to see if there was the actual email address provided from the sender, but it didn't look like it was.
Yeah.
It was just his name.
Yeah. But either way, I mean, really, I do appreciate Jack's mom's takeaway.
Yeah, that was nice.
She's like, I don't even care if it is paranormal, if it is just somebody screwing around. The fact that people are talking about my son again,
It makes her happy. That's
this
good.
is what I'm talking about. This episode got so wholesome. I was like, thank God.
honestly.
I know. I was a bit worried, especially that first story is so tragic and this like, oh my God. But then you get into some of these stories. I was just really happy to uncover this. A nice little nugget. It's one of those things where, you know, when you see a rock on a beach and it looks like it's sunk in the mud and has been there a long time, you kind of expect to pull it out and it's going to be like nasty something under
Covered
there,
in
like
barnacles.
scary. Yeah, just disturbing. But it's like picking it up and there's an Easter bunny under there. And I like that. The 2001 case is one of the best examples of how these communications can change lives. It involved a woman who went by the name Sarah, and her boyfriend had just been in a motorcycle accident that left him in a coma and ultimately led to his death. After this, Sarah fell into grief, depression, hopelessness, and thoughts of suicide. Soon after, she underwent surgery for a ruptured appendix, and during that operation, she had a near-death experience, otherwise known as an NDE. These can happen during a life-threatening crisis or clinical death, and they're often very spiritual or hyper-real experiences. We should maybe do an NDE episode, I think. But sometimes during these experiences, you feel disconnected from your body, you pass through a tunnel or see a light, and you can encounter deceased loved ones or what they call beings of light. Sometimes you can experience a rapid life review, as we kind of see in movies, or you come across a border, like a point of no return, that you sense that you cannot cross. I actually had a friend whose mom had a heart attack, and she said that after that she was hospitalized, and her vision was she appeared in this big green field and there was a hill off in the distance. She saw a gathering of people dressed in gray suits and dresses, and she soon realized that these people were her deceased family members, and they were kind of beckoning her to come walk up this hill with them. But then the vision ended. So it definitely sounded like she had an NDE after this heart attack. And so I guess it's very common. That's like the point of no return. I never really understood that until that I encountered that friend's story. But anyway, back to Sarah. During this NDE, while she was undergoing surgery, Sarah encountered her dead boyfriend, Christopher, and she promised him that she would do her best to continue on with life. Months after recovering from the procedure, she traveled to a beach with her friend, and she expressed that again, she was struggling with suicidal thoughts. Another friend then told her that her boyfriend had randomly received an email from Christopher, even though he had been dead for several months by then. In this email, Christopher expressed that he apologized for the tragic way in which he died and how much pain it had caused Sarah. Now, this friend's boyfriend might have only been trying to comfort Sarah at the time, but then he referenced the conversation that they had during her NDE, her near-death experience, and the promise that she had made Christopher. And according to Sarah, she had not told anyone about this. So she interpreted the message as a way of Christopher reaching out to her. It's pretty profound. The thing that sets this one apart from the others is that the message was communicated through a friend's boyfriend who was not emotionally close to the recipient. Most of these interactions are directly experienced by close friends and family. Now, it's possible Sarah might have shared the details of her NDE with someone and then forgotten, but according to several studies, not many choose to share details of NDEs out of fear of being dismissed or misunderstood. Same reason people don't want to share after-death communications. Or her friend might have seen that she was having a crisis, so she orchestrated the email from her dead boyfriend to try and help. That seems a bit, ultimately kind of cruel or disrespectful. So I'm not sure I believe that. But as always, the objective truth or reality of the situation often takes the back seat. These experiences still leave a very transformative impression on those who experience it, as it did for Sarah. But this next story, in my opinion, is the cherry on top. There was a French sociologist, Laurent Kasparovich. Sadly, his beloved dog passed away from lung cancer. About 4 days later, he was grieving his loss in the car with his mother and brother, and he said, "In heaven, I hope we meet our dogs again. I really wish I could get a sign." Not even 1 minute later, he received a text from a number he didn't recognize, and it said in all caps, "Hi, my arrival went great. Everything's going well. Julie." His dog was a female, but not named Julie. Still, the message was just coincidental enough, and the arrival, quote unquote arrival, made it sound like a spirit entering the afterlife. Since it was fall and school was starting, it might have been a text from someone getting settled into college, or maybe they were just getting settled into their classes at school, but he didn't ask for a message from his dog. He simply asked for a sign. So he believed this text was that sign. Really, this was only the beginning. The next day, Laurent's apartment landline was ringing off the hook day and night, and when the family answered, no one was there. When they contacted an information hotline, they told the family that no calls had been placed. They also began to notice that the apartment's intercom would sound at the same time that the phone rang. Other times, cell phones would ring when they were turned off. Voice messages would be left without an incoming call first, or the calls couldn't be traced at all. And the answering machine would record after they picked up the phone, which was odd. It was as if all the communication-based machines in this apartment were malfunctioning. When they listened to the answering machine recordings, it sounded like a family around a dinner table laughing. The phone rang yet again, but one time, after a few moments of silence on the other end, a tapping sound came through. And after trying to communicate with it, Laurent discovered that one tap meant no, two meant yes. He then asked questions only people within his family would know, and the tapping responded correctly every time. He then asked, "Was my dog too old?" The tapping responded, "No." This was true, since the dog had died of cancer, not old age. Suddenly, Laurent listened as the panting of a dog came through the phone. He didn't think it was a coincidence that his dog had died of lung cancer, and now he heard one breathing through the phone. 1 hour after this encounter, the phone rang again. He had one final conversation through the tapping noises, and then the call cut off. This marked their final encounter. Laurent noted 17 strange encounters in total, and with many of the phone calls, Laurent noticed some coincided with the dog's time of death. What sets this one apart is obviously the fact that the deceased is a dog, not a human, and the communication was through taps and breathing, not a voice. With a case like this, which is awesome but borderline ridiculous since it's a dog, it leads to the idea of the trickster archetype. I had never really heard of this, but this is essentially a paranormal force that operates under the cloak of absurdity and confusion. Basically, if the spirit of the man's dog did truly pass on into some form of afterlife where the dog could still communicate with the living, the truth is obscured by how goofy the experience is. So a skeptic can easily write the whole thing off. So yeah, a part of me does write this one off pretty quickly, but a part of me thinks it was maybe a family member staging the whole thing to help get this man through his grieving with his dog. But then another part of me hopes that I might get to experience something like this. And Jerry, this is never going to happen, but hypothetically, if Jerry ever passes away, I would like to be able to communicate with my dog like this. So Robert, hypothetically, when the time eventually comes and I'm completely and utterly emotionally destroyed and devastated into oblivion and into my own personal hell, I'm formally requesting you to set up an extremely elaborate paranormal encounter so that I can speak with Jerry again somehow. Can you do this?
No problem. And I was thinking, instead of taps being used for communication, the 1 for no, 2 for yes kind of thing, I was thinking Jerry's cute yawn for yes, maybe. And then maybe a Jerry throw up noise for no.
Perfect. You know, the Jerry throw up noise though is, I hate it so much. I get thrown into a panic every time I hear it because it's like the dry heaving noise.
Yeah.
And it takes me back to the days when she was a puppy and she was throwing up a lot. And I would wake up to that noise and have to scramble out of bed and grab Jerry and like get her to the tile floor so she wouldn't throw up everywhere on the carpet or on the bed or anything. So
Pretty
maybe
strong no.
Maybe not not that. Maybe we can get some better noises.
Maybe
I like the
she
yawn
hates
noise.
it.
Yeah.
I like the yawn noise as a yes. Maybe for no, a sneeze, a nice Jerry sneeze.
There we go.
Yeah. But now I'm going to flash myself with a neuralizer so that I forget we ever had this conversation. So it can be a surprise down the line. But Jerry, you're never going to die. So this is never going to happen. Knowing how far communication technology has come and also knowing that these encounters with the dead have adapted to each new generation of technology, you have to ask, where does it all go from here? Unfortunately, this ends up in AI avatars of the dead. Robert sent me this promotional video for this company. Is it two-way? Is that how you're supposed to pronounce it?
Yeah, I was reading it as 2-way.
It's the number 2 WAI. I get the AI as a part of it. It's stupid. Anyway, it doesn't matter. 2-way, 2Y, 2-way would make sense. It wasn't even 2 minutes long, this promotional video. I couldn't even make it to the end. I was just so appalled and frustrated by it. But it shows an expecting mother speaking to an AI recreation of her deceased mother. And it goes on, correct me if I'm wrong, because I didn't watch the rest of it, but it goes on and it shows her interactions with her deceased mother through the stages of this child's life, like as she's raising it. Was that the concept?
It goes further where it's like the mom's kid is having a kid and is showing AI grandma him having a kid and talking about,
holy hell,
you love this kind of thing. It's
wow.
extra creepy. Yeah.
I didn't even make it to the second act of that 2-minute ad. I was so disgusted by it. Yeah. But this company was co-founded by former Disney Channel actor Calum Worthy. I have no idea who this guy is. Yeah,
never heard of him.
Turns out when you fall into obscurity, you end up funding an AI company. But this company claims that, quote, each avatar can exist in a unique panoramic world with multidimensional movement. The hollow avatars can manage unlimited simultaneous conversations and communicate in 40 languages, allowing consumers and businesses to bridge geographic and language barriers. 2-way's FedBrain technology keeps creators firmly in control of their hollow avatars with managed access to pre-approved... Shut up. But they claim that you can create the avatar by feeding it only 3 minutes of video of a loved one. And they say that their product is inspiring a new era of human connection. Yes, by actively dismantling human connection. That's essentially what you're doing. But luckily, the backlash against this product was very fierce when it was announced last year. One person called it demonic, dishonest, and dehumanizing. I couldn't agree more. There's also literally a Black Mirror episode about this. I don't often use the word literally because I think it's overused, but there is literally a Black Mirror episode about this one. It's season 2, episode 1. A woman creates an AI version of her boyfriend who dies. And like every Black Mirror episode, I can't really remember the end of this one. I know I've seen it, but I assume it ends terribly. Like most of it's all dystopian and it's really disturbing by the
ending.
No, rarely ever. If anyone remembers that episode, can you please remind me in the comments how that one ends? I hope it doesn't end well. But also, can you ever truly delude yourself into thinking that this is actually your loved one for a split second? Because at least with the paranormal encounters, there's enough doubt in those where I'm like, that could have been, potentially, possibly.
Yeah.
Like maybe I'm left confused if it were to ever happen. I'm like, really can't explain that one. With AI, this is absolutely not my loved one.
Yeah, you're just lying to yourself at that point.
Yeah. Not to mention the paranormal encounters in these phone calls aren't a product that is being sold by a corporation. The telephone maybe is a product, but the experience itself isn't being sold like it is in this AI circumstance. The whole thing is so bizarre, and if you know anything about grief, one of the biggest parts of the process is acceptance and moving on and letting go. But with this AI, can you really ever reconcile that pain? Can you really ever let go? Because it feels like it's trying to build consumers who are dependent on this product. With the phone calls of the dead, as these studies showed, the encounter can actually help someone through the grieving process rather than having them linger on it. And obviously, there's no way to know if these calls are truly coming from the dead. There's no verifiable scientific evidence to back this up. So that's why there's quite a bit of faith involved. And that uncertainty of truth can really make people vulnerable and open them up emotionally. So there's much more authenticity to that experience rather than the AI one. Robert was talking about earlier, though, how, potentially not all these phone calls from the dead are these very wholesome, peaceful, calming experiences. We can assume, we didn't come across any that were people who were disturbed by it or were kind of lingering. It's probably bound to happen with these cases, but as far as I could find, did you come across any that were inherently like negative or people couldn't move on?
No, nothing negative was talked about. Like you mentioned earlier in the episode, the stats typically lean toward positive reaction to these. But what I was wondering, I was trying to put myself in the shoes of someone who receives after-death communication.
Yeah.
And I feel like I would just be put in a weird, there could be some degree of positive that, positive and comfort that's brought to me. But I feel like I would be just in a weird headspace after. Like, just, what did I just experience? Like, what's going on? Kind of question reality thing. And then that made me think about, what if people became obsessive over the next phone call that may not ever come? And would that have negative consequences on one's life if they take on this, obsessive stance and hoping that they receive another call at some point? That just kind of popped into my head too.
Let me ask you this one then. Do you think you would become obsessive if you were to get a phone call from a loved one who has passed?
Depends how good the phone call went. If I say something stupid, thanks, you too.
Just embarrass myself in front of my grandpa yet again. Yeah. No one's ever going to be proud of me now.
No, but really, I don't think I would be obsessive about it, but I do know I would be in a weird headspace. Like, that's kind of the conclusion they came to, is like, that would be so strange to experience.
Even just from my after-death communication with my grandpa, the dream, even that was so unsettling to the point that I still vividly remember it. I was so impressionable then, but I think it did somewhat disturb me as well. Just opening up this unknown gateway to like what actually could potentially be out there. Because if I didn't know about this element of communicating with something from the unknown. What else is out there? It kind of opens up a can of worms of mystery and almost paranoia, maybe for me.
Yeah.
It's like, if this can happen, then what else?
And you could tell it left a mark on you because you're able to remember all these details that you provided.
Right.
And
Yeah.
normally for a dream, I feel like that's really hard to do.
Yeah. Even I have like really intense, vivid dreams now, and I can't remember them the second after I wake up if I don't log them.
Yeah. But that one really stuck with you.
Yeah. But really through this whole thing, I've been wondering if I truly believe in any of these cases. That's the big question. I'd say that the case that maybe comes closest to convincing me that this is possible is that first case of Charles Peck. But really personally, regardless if they're real or not, I think the biggest takeaway is that there is often a purpose to these calls, at least one that we find along the way. Many people who experience phone calls from the dead find a sense of comfort, as we were saying. So regardless if you believe in these instances or not, the real, truth with maybe a small t is that when you're grieving, a phone call or experience like this could be a crucial step in that grieving process. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways here. Jumping to the physical media section of this episode, we got one of my favorite horror movies within the past few years. It is Bring Her Back by the Philippou brothers. Got this sucker in 4K. Love this movie so much. Without spoiling too much, it explores loss and grief and how difficult the process of letting go can be. If you guys remember, I did cover their first feature, Talk to Me, in one of my earlier episodes. And while I do love that movie a lot, I actually think this is their second feature, is much, much more refined and a better movie overall. I always know a horror movie is amazing when it can make me a bit giddy, like a schoolgirl when I'm watching it. And I start laughing, not because I'm laughing at something that's intentionally funny, but it's so disturbing and executed so well that I'll start to laugh because I'm impressed with how well the filmmakers did it. Like they pulled something off that was shocking to me. I'm like, I've never seen this in a horror movie, or how did that convince me so thoroughly? That happened several times during this movie. There's several moments.
Like every 15 minutes or something, there's another scene where you're like, wow.
This is nuts. Yeah, this is crazy. So highly recommend Bring Her Back, Philippou brothers. I also do this thing, which is really annoying, but I rarely do this, but I'll actually start clapping. Sometimes it's just one single clap while I'm watching a movie. If something, especially in a horror movie, I've noticed is super top notch. The very end of Weapons, I was in the theater and I clapped once really loud. And I know I look so stupid. I look like an ape while doing it, but I did it with this one as well during one scene, which I won't spoil. But I remember I just and I clap really loud because I get so excited. But if that's a testament to how good I think this movie is, how great, how exceptional I find this movie. Go check it out. Bring Her Back. Danny and Michael Philippou. Philippou. Philippou.
Couple of Aussies, I think.
Yeah, that they are. Now jumping to the Q&A. We have Jennifer, who said, just one question from me, which you may or may not have discussed or answered already. What is the creepiest thing to have happened to you that you can't explain? I'm not weird. I like these topics among friends. Trin80 also asked, what's the creepiest firsthand experience? So we got a double whammy here from two different people. I have a really cool story, which actually my editor, Kelly, can kind of testify to some degree. But we were in Italy and we stayed in this really big castle in the middle of Umbria. And my aunt one night was telling this extremely scary story. It kind of put us all on edge. It probably did something to our unconscious that kind of planted the seeds for this to even begin. But I won't even do her stories justice, but it was after that, we had all gone to bed. And my cousin and I actually experienced different but kind of similar things across the castle. I was way over disconnected on one end, kind of in my own sleeping quarters, that I felt sequestered from the rest of the castle. And my cousin was on the very top floor of this castle on the opposite end. But I wake up around 3 a.m., maybe 4 a.m., the witching hour. And I had been leaving my bathroom door open with the light on inside. It was just like a night light because we were drinking a ton of wine while we were staying there. Then I would go to bed and drink a ton of water because I was like, I don't want to be hungover the next day, which I was never hungover from that wine because it was probably just really high quality. But anyway, I was waking up in the middle of the night to go use the restroom. And one time I woke up, I knew I left the light on and I was often leaving the door ajar. But I wake up, the light's off, and I'm hearing this incredibly strange, almost like clanking and then a humming noise coming from the bathroom. I could not explain what it was, and I couldn't explain why the lights were off. Then I was, I had the doubt. Oh, well, was I just drinking a lot of wine, forgot to turn the light on? I know that's what Robert's thinking right now because he's a natural skeptic. But I summoned the courage eventually to roll out of bed. Even taking the covers off. You're like, "Ooh, I'm so scared." So I go and I creep over to the bathroom. The sound stops. I turn on the light. Nothing's there, obviously. I'm like, that's strange. Go take a whiz, go back to bed. The next day, I'm talking to my cousin Kelly, and she's like, around that exact same time, she was hearing a different weird noise in her bedroom. She woke up my other cousin, Brent, her husband. She like wakes him up. She was so scared just to make sure everything was cool. But I'll maybe let her tell her end of that story at a later date if she ever gets on the pod. But yeah, that's my creepy story. I can't really explain it. I know it's a bit of recency bias because it just happened back in May, but that's one of my creepy stories that I have. Couldn't explain it. Matt, do you have one?
I do. I've one. It happened quite a few years ago. It's a short one, but one night I was in bed, I was sleeping, and at one point I thought I felt somebody sit down on my bed. But I thought, oh, maybe it's just my dog. My dog probably just jumped up on my bed, But I kind of, pulled the covers off and looked. There was nothing there. I just chalked it up to, maybe it was like a falling dream type thing where I just felt, it felt real, but it wasn't. But that same night, upstairs, my sister and her husband were in bed, sleeping. My sister was asleep, and her husband thought he saw her sitting at the edge of the bed. Like, he woke up, thought he saw her sitting there, and he said, "What are you doing?" Then my sister next to him said, "What are you talking about?" And he looked over at her and then looked back, and there was nothing there.
Wow.
This happened the same night. I didn't even tell him what happened to me. He told me the next morning that happened to him. I said, "You're never going to believe this, man."
Dang.
A similar thing happened. I felt something sit at the edge of my bed, and that's the only time that something like that has ever happened to me, but it kind of freaked me out
That's
a little
nuts.
bit. Yeah.
It's just a serial bed-sitting ghost.
Yeah. And I will say,
this bed looks real nice.
Looks
I'm
nice
gonna
and
sit
cozy,
down on this and
right?
freak someone out. Yeah.
I will say, though, my dog has, we've always joked that there was a ghost in our house because my dog will just stare at the wall sometimes.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
what are you looking at, dude? What's over there?
Yeah, I know they
So-
say like cats or dogs can sense paranormal presences.
So we
or
always
whatever.
joked about that, but then that happened, and we're like, oh,
Maybe this isn't a
maybe
joke.
this isn't a joke. Yeah,
Nice.
that's the only time something like that's ever happened to me.
Nice. Robert?
I don't have anything cool. It's not even creepy. It's not even something creepy. But one night I woke up and we keep our door open a little bit in bedroom so our cat can.
I thought you were just going to start repeating my exact story.
We left the
the
door
bathroom
ajar.
door was open with the nightlight.
I was in a
lots of
castle in
wine.
Italy.
Yeah.
No. In my house, in the middle of the night, I woke up and I just thought my cat was standing on top of the door. And that's the creepiest thing that happened to me.
Ghost
Wow.
cat.
Wow.
Ghost cat.
There was
The
no
ghost cat.
There was no way that I'd never seen the cat do that before. There's no way to climb up, so I'm counting as a ghost cat.
Yeah.
That story is lame, but what I like about it is that you point out the cliche of one night I woke up. I didn't realize that is totally the cliche
of all of our stories.
Yes,
start like
it's
that.
a total cliche that it's you're always waking up in the middle of the night.
Which is like, I guess maybe it's our dreaming brain not waking up completely.
Yeah.
So we're waking up, but our brain isn't completely woken up.
Yeah. It's still feeding us our dreams.
Experiencing these strange things.
Well, it's like it was a dark and stormy night almost, but that's the equivalent of a paranormal story. I woke up one night.
And there was a cat standing on my door.
Yeah.
Just perfectly perched.
This is the lamest paranormal story.
Oscar, don't fall.
Right.
That was
the terror.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I couldn't fall asleep after that. I was up for days.
And this is why we're keeping the Q&A section at the end of these, because I like just being able to screw around. I hope you guys like it as well. Keep feeding me the questions. They're getting a bit slim. And I need you guys to keep feeding us some questions, maybe some fun questions, maybe some stupid questions, maybe just feed me some, what do they call it? Just some icebreaker questions. We get to know each other. But yeah, I have a lot of fun with these Q&As. Do you guys like the Q&A section?
Oh, yeah.
All right. You can be honest.
No, I love them, man. Right.
Do you like the other sections of the podcast?
Oh, the rest of it?
Do you like the? Yeah, that's what I was worried about. I listened to the whole thing just to get to the Q&A.
Just keep the Q&A, scrap the rest.
Yeah. But with all that said, remember to go smash all those buttons. This show, we're just so small. We're just a bit too small, and I need your guys' help a little bit longer. We're still not sponsored by any ads, and I know it sounds like I'm whiny right now, and I'm sorry, but it's cool to see I have such a core following, but we need to bud a little bit more. We need to see the flower come through. So always remember to try and if you haven't subscribed across all platforms, go and do that. Listen through to all the episodes as you guys have been doing, and just generally keep supporting the podcast. It means so much to me. The support really keeps me going. Every time I see your guys' comments about like, oh my God, this is one of my favorite podcasts, it really keeps me going. I'm not saying that. Speaking of cliches, I could just be saying that like, oh, it really keeps me going. But I have some pretty bummer days here and there. And sometimes those comments come through exactly when I need them. So big shout out to all the fans here. All the love is so much appreciated by me and by Robert and Kelly as well. We try and bring you guys an awesome show here. So always remember, when the phone rings and you check the caller ID and you're almost 1,000% certain it's definitely your mom on the other end, always ask yourself, do geese call God? Think about it.